Hey everybody, I'm going to read this book, A Place Where Sunflowers Grow by Amy Lee Tai and Felicia Hoshino. Mari stared at the ground. It had only been a week since she and her mother had planted a handful of sunflower seeds outside their new home. Mari asked Mama, "Will these flowers grow as big and tall and strong and beautiful as the ones in our old backyard?" "It will take time, patience, and care," Mama replied gently. Sabaku nihana wa sodashikinu noyo. "Flowers don't grow easily in the desert," Mari repeated in English. She glared at the sand like the hot May sun, as if it might make the seeds spring to life. But all she saw were dry grains of sand. As she watered the seeds, Mari thought of her family's little house in California. Her parents, who were artists, would paint where Mari and her older brother Kenji played alongside them in their flower-filled backyard. Had it only been 13 months since they were forced to leave? First, they had to live in a house stall that smelled of manure in Tanford, California. Now they were living in a tar paper barrack in Topaz, Utah. Everything but her family had been taken from Mari, and she hadn't done anything wrong. "Mari-chan, it's 3 o'clock, time for art school." Papa's tender voice pulled Mari back to reality. "Let's not be late. Aikuni." Some of these words are in Japanese, and down here it's written in Japanese, but I don't know how to read Japanese, unfortunately. Mari and Papa walked the windy, dusty mile from their home to Block 29 at Topaz Art School on Block 7. They passed beneath watchtowers where military police watched everyone they feared they might escape. Mari clutched Papa's hand. "Mari-chan, Mama and I are worried about you," said Papa. "We know things are tough here, but you barely talk or laugh anymore. Do you want to talk about it?" "Not really," mumbled Mari, though she actually had many questions. "Not really," mumbled Mari. Oh wait, sorry. "Don't worry, Mari-chan. We'll go home after the war ends." They walked the rest of the way in silence. The mountains, the vast sky, and the blazing sun made Mari feel as small as a sunflower seed. At Topaz Art School, Papa brought Mari to her classroom, then went next door to teach the adult sketching class. Mari had hoped to see some friends in class, but didn't recognize anyone. "Mrs. Hanamoto passed out paper and crayons," she said. "For our first class, have fun and draw whatever you want." Mari listened to the tapping and swishing of crayons at other desks. She thought long and hard, but her paper was still blank as class ended. A few students shared their drawings with the class. Janie drew the pet dog she had left behind. Eddie drew his 3 cousins who had been sent to a camp in Idaho. Aiko drew different places in Topaz, the mess hall, the latrine, the laundry room. Mari enjoyed the other drawings, but wished she had one of her own to share. Since Papa had another class to teach, Mari walked by herself to the mess hall. Mama and Kenji met her outside. Passing through the mess hall doorway was like turning up the volume on a radio. Utensils clanged, people talked, babies cried. Mari cringed at the noise. The family took their place in the long dinner line, and Papa joined them just before they received their portion of food. As they sat down, Papa asked, "Mari-chan, how was your first class?" "I couldn't think of anything to draw," said Mari. "That happens to me too sometimes," Papa replied. "Really?" asked Mari. "Even though you're an artist?" "Yes," Papa smiled, "but I don't give up." The morning of the next art class, Mari and Mama waited in the long line at the latrine. The toilet and shower stalls had no doors. Mari and Mama tried to avoid looking at the other women and girls. Mama asked. Mari-chan, are you worried about today's class? Mari nodded. She had been wondering when Mrs. Hanamoto would ask her to draw. Remember Papa's advice. You will be able to draw, just like your sunflowers will be able to grow. That afternoon, Mrs. Hanamoto told the class, draw something that makes you happy at Topaz. Again, Mari struggled for an idea. Then Mrs. Hanamoto appeared at her desk. Mari-chan, I noticed that you didn't draw anything in our last class. Some other students had a hard time. I wasn't the only one? Mari answered hopefully. No, that happens quite often. You just have to keep trying. Now, what are you going to draw? I can't think of anything that makes me happy at Topaz. Then draw something that made you happy before you came here, suggested Mrs. Hanamoto. This time, Mari knew right away. Her backyard in California. She drew the swing that Papa had built, the sakura tree that Mama had planted, and the garden with its rainbow of colors. She was still busy drawing when Mrs. Hanamoto announced that class was almost over. Mari noticed that Aiko, who sat next to her, was looking at her picture. Aiko whispered, Your backyard looks like a lot of fun. Mari whispered back, Maybe you can visit when we all go home. Mari walked home as quickly as she could. She burst into her family's barrack. How was art class, Mari-chan? Asked Mama, expecting only a quiet reply. But Mari answered quickly, Mrs. Hanamoto is nice, and I got to use crayons, and I drew this picture. It's our old backyard, exclaimed Kenji. Mama smiled. It is lovely. Why don't we hang it up? Sunlight streamed through the open barrack door. Mari hung her drawing on the bare wall above her bed. It added a little cheer to the dark one-room home, even when it was time to close the door. Every Wednesday and Sunday, Mari and Papa walked together to art school. Hand in hand, they shared peaceful, silent moments. Mari began to ask Papa questions. Why are we in camp? Why is almost everyone here Japanese American? Will I ever see my old friends again? He and Mama had resigned themselves to the internment, but Papa tried his best to answer. He turned to Japanese philosophy, noting the circle of life. Spring comes after winter, and flowers bloom again. Peace comes after war. Try not to worry, Mari-chan. It was as if with every drawing she created, Mari found another question to ask, and the courage to ask it. One day, after art class, Aiko asked Mari, Do you want to walk home together? My family lives on Block 40. Sure, that sounds like fun, replied Mari. Besides, those guardsmen scare me. Me too, agreed Aiko. As they walked and talked, Mari and Aiko didn't notice the sky begin to darken, and the wind began to blow. Suddenly, a wall of dirt, twigs, and sagebush roots rushed towards them, stinging their skin. Dust storm, shouted Aiko, grabbing Mari's hand. They tried to run, but it was difficult to move or see anything in the heavy, dirty wind. Together they managed very slowly to make their way to Mari's barrack. They slammed the door and collapsed on the floor, coughing and gasping for air. Mama rushed towards them. Mari-chan, Aiko-chan, are you all right? We're fine, Mama, said Mari, covered in dirt from head to toe. She and Aiko burst out laughing, relieved to be safe and happy, to be friends, and from then on, they walked home together after every art class. In August, during the last week of class, Mrs. Hanamoto said, Today, create a drawing using different shapes. Mari drew her family's barrack using rectangles, squares, and a triangle. Then she added circles, lines, and teardrop shapes, her sunflowers. She included Aiko and herself. The sunflowers towered above their heads, so high they couldn't even reach them on their tippy toes. For the first time, Mari volunteered to share her drawing with the class. As she spoke, she noticed Mrs. Hanamoto's and Aiko's smiling faces, as cheerful as the sunflowers in her drawing. After class, Mari and Aiko walked home together. Mari looked at her new drawing and said, "I've watered my sunflower seeds every day for 3 months now. I wonder if my sunflowers are ever going to grow here." Suddenly, Aiko stopped and pointed and said, "You can stop wondering." Mari followed Aiko's finger to the side of Mari's barrack, where 9 tiny green stems peeked through the ground. "Mama, Kenji, come see!" exclaimed Mari. She couldn't wait to show Papa when he got home. To Mari, seeing the little seedlings was like seeing old friends again. In that moment, her old life and whatever her new life would be like after the war didn't seem so far away. And there's a picture of the artist and the author. Thanks for reading with me.